everybody, it's Ellie here with WhoCulture. We did it! We made it to the end of the 60th anniversary specials. And let me tell you, the Giggle was monumental. Not least of all because of that monumental change that we saw with regards to regeneration. So we thought, let's discuss that. Let's talk about what that means for the show. And also, Russell T Davies has revealed some more information about that current situation as well. So let's get into it. So first of all, just a quick recap. In case you've forgotten, highly doubt you have, but let's just have a quick recap. We're on the helipad of Stark Towers and Unit Towers. Still can't get over it. It's Stark Towers. It's so obviously Stark Towers. Not the point, Ellie, not the point. And we have the Doctor stood there going, "Your fight is with me! Don't shoot my friends!" So he goes, "Okay then," and shoots the beam right at the Doctor. And if you heard some sort of rumbling thud during that moment, that will be just the sound of every viewer's jaw hitting the floor. Even though we knew a regeneration was coming in this episode, still doesn't make it any less shocking when you see the Doctor get shot or killed in some way. He starts to do his orange glowing and you're like, here it comes. Here comes the regeneration. We have his final words, Alonzi, and he doesn't change. And they pull his arms and there we have it, Bigeneration. And we then have two Doctors. The 15th Doctor actually says that Bigeneration is a myth. Now, this could have something to do with the idea that the Doctor, what's the word he used? He invoked superstition at the edge of the galaxy. So this could suggest that by doing that, allowed these myths to suddenly become reality. Obviously, the other possibility being that the Toymaker has twisted reality to make this a possibility. And the Doctor does say later to the Toymaker, "You made this happen." So it very much suggests that in the world of play, in the Toymaker's reality, this is a possibility, a myth that has now become reality. So let's talk about Bigeneration and my personal thoughts on it, what the overall response to it has been. I'm gonna be honest, I had seen a lot of, not leaks per se, but I had seen a lot of speculation about this being a possibility before the episode aired. And so I would say that I wasn't necessarily surprised when it happened, which was slightly disappointing because I think if I had gone in completely unaware or unsuspecting, this would have been absolutely a major jaw on the floor moment. And don't get me wrong, it still was, but I wasn't as surprised as I would have perhaps been if I hadn't gone in with a slight inkling that this might have been the case. At first, I just didn't know what to think. I was a bit confused. I know that in the past we have had, we had the Meta-Crisis Doctor, so we did have two there, and that was explained in a certain way because he grew out of the hand. When I watched it a second time, I definitely feel like I appreciated it more and understood it more. Having said that, I did have some initial concerns. I guess only time will tell as to whether these concerns are warranted or whether I had nothing to worry about, and I know that other people have had these concerns as well. First of all, does the remaining of David Tennant's Doctor kind of detract from Ncuti slightly? Obviously, it's a major thing to step into the role of the Doctor. It must be so nerve-wracking for any actor stepping into the role because you have major shoes to fill every single time. But on top of that, you have David Tennant's shoes to fill. And so while that is really nerve-wracking and you have really got to prove yourself, as Matt Smith had to do, does keeping David Tennant around kind of suggest a little bit of a lack of confidence in Ncuti? I don't think that is the case. And as we've established, this is a whole new avenue for the show that we've never seen before. But that was an initial, but that was only a kind of passing concern that I very much was squashed the moment that Ncuti kind of started jumping around and very much was the Doctor. The other concern that I'm really kind of lingering on at the moment is we did a video not too long ago discussing David Tennant's future in Doctor Who, and one of the big things that I said in that video was that my concern over how many times do we bring David Tennant back before it loses its meaning and power. David Tennant is such a popular incarnation of the Doctor, and so to bring him back is a monumental thing and does bring those audience members back in. But if we've had this multiple times now where it's like we never have a definitive ending with him. There's always the potential for him to come back, and while that's great and everyone loves to see him, how many times do you bring him back before he's back again? It's not a really jaw-dropping revelation because he's back again. And so obviously by keeping him as the Doctor and keeping him with a TARDIS, you've kind of got this thing in the back of your head suggesting, well, he's going to be back again soon, isn't he? None of the other Doctors get this luxury, you know, and I know a lot of the actors don't want that, but, you know, you just don't want it to lose its power and meaning by overdoing it. And that's one of my slight concerns. But I guess time will tell as to what that means for David Tennant in Doctor Who. Another concern that I have seen is people suggesting that Russell T Davies has just changed the show for the sake of it. And obviously this is a complaint that a lot of people had about the Timeless Child story arc as well. Personally, I think the two things are massively different. This has been introduced now and changes the future of the show. The Timeless Child arc was introduced, changed and altered the entire history of Doctor Who as we knew it, and hasn't really been explored any further. And so it kind of was introduced for no reason, because there's been no real payoff to that major change in the past and history of Doctor Who. Whereas this introduction of Bigeneration, it hasn't changed anything we've seen in the past, and now only introduces a whole new avenue for the show to go down in the future. And so you can explore that as you watch, as opposed to having to now think, well, everything I thought I knew has changed. That's not the case in this instance. So beyond what we learned in the episode itself with regards to the Bigeneration, we actually learned some more from Russell T Davies himself in the iPlayer in Vision commentary of the episode. So first and foremost, he said that this was always his intention. From the moment he knew he was coming back, this was always his intention. It wasn't something that kind of popped up once they knew that Ncuti Gatwa had been cast or anything like that. He always intended for this to be the direction that he took the show in. He also commented that he really wasn't keen on doing, you know, the traditional multi-Doctor story, but having the current Doctor and the future, the next Doctor, come together was something that he'd wanted to do for a long time, and this was the opportunity for him to do it. But something that was even more intriguing that he mentioned, which maybe slightly contradicts my whole comment on the Timeless Child thing being very different, although obviously this is just a comment he's made whilst there's something that's going on in his mind as opposed to something that's been literally explicitly said in the show itself. But he basically suggested that Bigeneration could happen with any of the Doctors, and in his mind has happened with any of the Doctors, not just 14 and 15. All Doctors at some point have split as opposed to changing, and there's a Doctorverse, multiple universes in which every single Doctor went on to live their own life. So, you know, there's a time where Sylvester McCoy suddenly wakes up in that morgue and carries on living. There's a universe where Nine and Rose continued on their journeys and he never changed into David Tennant. Essentially what Russell T Davies was commenting on here and suggesting was that he wanted to introduce some sort of explanation so that in the future you can bring back those Doctors to a story without having to explain why they look older or how they are there. And by introducing this idea that Bigeneration can happen and that there's a multiverse, a Doctorverse, in which there are multiple storylines and avenues for which any Doctor's life could take, it would not need to be explained too much if suddenly Sylvester McCoy appeared with Ncuti Gatwa next week, looking as he does today, and that wouldn't need to be explained because he's just a Doctor from a different universe in which he never changed and just aged. Tales of the TARDIS was kind of a good example of this, where we had all these Doctors who lived in a different time where they never changed, they aged, and they existed in this little bubble. So it is a very interesting way to look at the show. And I think it's very good to give this explanation in a simple explanation so that you can introduce multiple Doctor stories in a much simpler and less confusing way from a writing perspective, certainly. One thing that Russell T Davies did say, and he specifically mentioned the Spider-Verse and obviously the MCU with the multiverse, and that's something that's so present in pop culture now that most audience members can really grasp that now. And he mentioned that because audiences now have got an understanding of multiverses and are really on board with that prospect, now seems like a good time to introduce it in Doctor Who. And to my mind, if you can't do it in sci-fi, where can you do it? I mean, this is a show with limited possibilities, and as long as there's a good enough explanation as to why you've done it and how it works, within reason, sci-fi, you have the opportunity to do whatever you want to do. As I said, this is changing the future of the show, so it's not changing what we've already known, it's just taking the show in a different direction. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. And what I do like about this is that, again, as Russell has said, we can now have those doctors step into the role as they look now and not have to have them as a hologram as they were in The Power of the Doctor. You know, they appeared, but there had to be some way of explaining why they had aged suddenly and, you know, oh, well, you know, the TARDIS is just trying its best to compensate or whatever the explanation was there. And here, it can just be I'm a doctor from a different universe. Now, finally, as for the 14th Doctor himself, there's really no news on that front. We know there are spin-offs coming. It would seem that potentially we may see now a spin-off with 14 and Donna and the family and Mel and going off on random adventures. We know Yasmin Finney will be making more appearances, as Russell T Davies has stated previously. So is that going to be with Ncuti? Is that going to be with David Tennant? We do not know. What I will say is I do not think we're going to have any announcements with regards to that incarnation of the Doctor anytime soon. Let's now let Ncuti have his time. At least let his first season come out and let everyone fall in love with this new incarnation. You know, we said earlier about David Tennant overshadowing Ncuti Gatwa, and I think the balance was perfect in this particular story, but now we need to let Ncuti really take hold of the reins and find his feet in the role of the Doctor and let everyone get a chance to fall in love with this version of the character. But I also would not be surprised if at some point down the line we do end up seeing more of 14 and Donna Noble. I think at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is how well a story is told. If it is used in the correct way, then it will be an absolutely wonderful story. If it's just used as a get out jail free card, a cop out, a really easy get around to not have to explain something, then it doesn't feel worth it. I think the future of the show is going to surprise us, but not necessarily in a bad way. That's just my thoughts. Let me know yours. Let me know your thoughts on the whole Bigeneration storyline in the comments down below. Also, make sure that you check out Sean's Ups and Downs review of the Giggle. And in the meantime, I've been Ellie with WhoCulture, and in the words of River Song herself, goodbye, sweeties.